right, welcome to another episode of CRE, The Unspoken Truth. I'm Charlie Coppola, COO of CRE OneSource, and I'm joined by my father, Craig, who's our CEO, founded this company together here 2 years ago now, in 2021. Craig has been a broker at Lee & Associates for his, the bulk of his career, done a ton of deals, and so picking up a new tip or bit of wisdom here today. Today, we're talking about oxygen and specifically in brokerage, right? What do brokers need? So I want to start with new brokers. Someone who just started the business, what does a new broker need to be thinking about?
That's a great question. And you started with oxygen. That's not a common term. We use it internally because we have a page on a deal view, which we call oxygen, which is our dashboard. But what oxygen means is something you need to survive, right? It is something that you need to actually make it into businesses. And as you know, 87% of all brokers fail within the first 5 years. And why do they fail? The number one reason is cash flow. And so we have a saying that if there's a God in small business and brokerage, his name is cash flow. And so when we say, what is oxygen? Oxygen is cash flow. So how do you get cash flow? You got to have pipeline. So the first thing that people have to do is create a pipeline. And so you can have everything else that you want. You can have commitment, you can have motivation, you can have relationships, but if you don't have any pipeline and you're not closing deals, you are not going to survive. So that's what I would say is absolutely oxygen is pipeline.
You need pipeline, and we've done another podcast on pipeline. It was one of our most favorited, most popular episodes, and so check that out if you haven't listened to it. But you're just starting out, brokers, and I know this conversation comes to mind. You were talking to a broker who just started the business 4, 5, 6 months ago. I sat in on the conversation. You let me sit in on it, and you were giving him ideas and kind of guidance in a few different areas, one of them being mentorship. So a broker that's just getting into the business, how important is having a mentor, and what would you say they should look for in a mentor?
Yeah, I think that we should do an unspoken truth on mentorship, but let's talk just generally overall. In our business, it is still a business that you have to learn on the street. Being a broker and completing transactions, there's no manual for it. There's no real estate transaction. There's no degree that you can get. You can get a degree in commercial real estate from a number of institutions, but learning how to become a broker is still an apprentice business. And so if you're running in our running program, it's 2.5 years. Our runners run 2.5 years minimum to learn the business. They make very little money. They work a ton of hours, but they spend time with us. And so we pay them back because they get a PhD in learning how to do brokerage. And so one of the things I always say to everybody that we interview, you can come, we only take 2 runners every couple of years. And so we pass on a lot of people and we say, look, I say, look, we may not hire you, but the one thing you absolutely have to have is somebody who will teach you the business. And so when you're interviewing, the first question is, 1, have you done this before? 2, can I talk to that person? 3, how much time am I going to get of yours? I'm going to commit to you. I'm going to spend a ton of time with you. I'm going to hopefully make you a bunch of money, but in return, I want your time and I want your expertise. And that is it's a very hard thing for brokers because we tend to be lone wolves.
So there's no book. You got to learn by doing reps, doing deals, getting experience on the job. You've mentioned something, kind of on a different topic conversation, but I'd like to ask, you said something about, when someone breaks into the industry, pretty quickly whether they're going to make it or not. And I think you said there's 5 or 7 things that you look for. What are some of those that you say, hey, within 6 months, 12 months, if they check these 5, 6, 7 boxes, they actually have a chance at making it in brokerage? What are those?
I'll give you a couple. I'll give you a couple big ones. So the one of them is, which is a surprising one, is memory. Do you remember the person you met? Do you remember the transaction? A lot of our business is exuding exuding confidence and understanding what the marketplace is. So when you're looking to a client to hire you, they have to understand that you know the marketplace, you know it really well. You're not checking on what's going on. So who's the tenants in that building? When our runners start to canvas, I'll ask them, what building did you go canvas? And I'll say, all right, what tenants are in that building? All right, wasn't this tenant still in that building? And because I've been in all the buildings, I've been doing this a long time. And so I want them to know that this is important. And I think one of the hard things for people coming out of college, and, you know, we tend to not hire kids that come out of college. And the reason is they haven't been beaten up sufficiently. But the young folks that we have hired out of college, they treat canvassing and cold calling like a project or a term paper. You know, get it done, then forget about it. And that's not what happens in the real world. In the real world, we need to remember exactly who was in that building. We need to remember the empty spaces. We need to remember who the landlord was. We need to remember who we met last Friday night at a social cocktail hour and give them a call on Monday and say, hey, we had this conversation about XYZ. Those things. So memory is one of them. Commitment is another one. Obviously, I say this all the time. I don't interview anybody that doesn't want to commit to us. They all want to. But I can tell you that it's less than 50% that actually want to, that actually can then commit. And, you know, they think they can commit and they might do it for 90 days or 6 months or even a year. But, you know, to get into this business year in and year out and commit hours, 60 hours, 70-hour work weeks, very difficult. And it's hard on personal lives. It's hard on the person. So the commitment is a big one too. So that's 2 of the 6.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good. Those are good. So shifting from a broker breaking into the industry to someone who is more established, right? They may have been, you know, they may have had success now for 5, 10, 15 years. What do those brokers need to survive? You know, what are they saying on a daily basis, weekly basis? I need, you know, XYZ to run my operation.
Well, I'm going to give you a couple things. 2 of them we just talked about. The lifeline of any broker at any time is pipeline. So knowing what your pipeline is critical. And that's why we think we've hit a vein with this deal view, because it is pipeline and people have never seen their pipeline like we show it to them. But really important on that pipeline, because, you know, we get back to the God and cash flow. The second, and this is also in one of the 6, is this: can they continue to break through what we call ceilings of complexity? And what we mean by that, when you're a brand new broker, you're learning the business, you'll work your butt off and you'll start getting transactions on certain ways that you've done it. And then if you're trying to make it to the next level where you're making higher compensation, you might want to hire an assistant or get a runner. That's a ceiling of complexity where you're now not just a solo lone wolf, or you come in with a team and it's not working out, you got to go on your own. So you're having to figure out, how do I get through this ceiling of complexity? And so there are multiple ceilings of complexity, and we tend to look at those in terms of dollar volumes. There's a 6-figure ceiling of complexity. There's a $250,000 ceiling of complexity. There's a $500,000. There's one at $1 million, and then they continue to go on. And so each one of those, we say all the things that got you to where you're successful today have to be unlearned, because they're not what's going to break you through that ceiling. So the idea, when I first got into the business, I simply outworked everybody. But over time, you know, you run into a ceiling. I couldn't leverage myself enough. It didn't matter if I worked 100 hours a week, I couldn't leverage myself. So I had to build a team. And to do that, I have to have different skills. I had to learn how to hire correctly. It took me a long time to learn how to hire. I had to then train correctly. And then sometimes people would leave me. Then I had to learn to rehire and retrain. And then how do I build people that will run through walls for me and never leave me? That's a long-term, and, you know, it cost me my hair, but I now wake up at 62 years old next month and I have a great team.
And that, I don't think that's, you know, exclusive to brokerage. You know, I think the ceilings of complexity is true for every industry and every, you know, anyone who's trying to rise in their career. And I know they say it about, you know, startup company CEOs, the skill set to get you from 0 to, you know, a million in revenue or 20 employees or whatever is very different than growing to 100 employees, which is very different than getting to 1,000 and ultimately, becoming a public CEO. They're completely different, and that's why it's so rare to see, one person be able to do, all of those levels.
Yeah, I think to your point, we've had success now in my almost 40-year career. We've had 25 or 30 runners, graduate apprentices that have been through my team. Every single one of them, whether they stayed in the business, and I would say half of them, our ratio is much higher than 75%. I would say 50 to 60% have stayed in the business as a broker or some kind of in commercial real estate. The other 40% that got out of the business have been uber successful in other industries. And so what we've taught them on this ceiling complexity, the ability to learn. Ceiling complexity you hit a ceiling, and it's really a learning curve. You have to break through it and learn new skill sets. You have to break through and learn different things to do it. So the ability to learn might be a better way to state this. So all of the folks that got out of the business, whether it was for them or not, are really super successful. We have one of my runners is a bank president. He worked his way up to the bank, and he used to call me and he'd say, "This is the easy pickings," because he'd go to the bank and they were working 9 to 5, and he'd show up at 7 and he worked till 7, and all of a sudden he wakes up. He was 32 years old. He was a senior vice president. They tapped him to be a president of a bank. So literally at 35 years old, he became a president of a small bank, not in Arizona. He had moved back home. And so that's what really gives me lots of pride in the fact that we've done a good job, because I can look everybody that I look at and say, "I'm not sure you're going to make it in the business. I don't know, because you haven't worked for me, but I will guarantee you that when you're done, you're going to be able to go kick ass and take names in the marketplace, whether it's in brokerage or development or any other industry that you're in." In fact, we have one that was my runner, and he's now taking over his family's landscaping business. And the ideas that he's bringing to the dad's landscaping business is a lot. The dad's had it for a long time, and now he's bringing in new ideas that he learned from, working with us.
Yeah. And that's a tribute to the mentorship, right? And just, finding someone that will teach them and get them experience and teach them more than just doing deals, right? But I think, it's also a tribute to their commitment. And I think the commitment, the mentorship, the ceilings of complexity, and the commitment is what gets you through there. And that's how you can, rise in whatever field you're in, right?
So I think how this works is, you start out in the business, or you've been in the business 5 years, doesn't matter, 10 years. Every morning you're going to get up and look at your pipeline. That is sand, right? We talked about rock, gravel, sand in another episode of this. Is like, that is sand. This pipeline is how I'm going to eat. And I remember when I was a young broker, and your mom and I got married, and we were starting having kids, and it's like that I had to look at my pipeline, because like, how am I going to feed these 4 kids? And so that is absolutely critical. And then when I looked at that pipeline, I looked at it, whether it was robust or whether it was thin, and I said, I have got to commit. I have to build this business on a commitment that I'm going to be here a long term. And I just looked at our pipeline right now. We have we have like 200 and some deals in our pipeline in DealView. 161 of them are past clients. So you wake up now at our business, it's not easy because everybody's trying to steal your clients, but we have a ton of past clients. That's the majority of our business. So when we look at deal by source, which is one of the things we track, that came out in our meeting just an hour ago. It was like, we should be spending more time on this. And what we did, this is a change that we just made literally an hour ago, is we've been spending 5% of our time on past clients. That's kind of the mark that we do. We try, and when we track our time, and we're going to up it. We're going to double that. Like, why not? That's where we're making our money.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, really to summarize here, Oxygen, obviously, what do brokers need to survive? And number one is cash flow, pipeline, right? Pipeline is oxygen. We had a previous episode, pipeline is heartbeat. In terms of new brokers breaking into the industry, right? There's no book on brokerage. There's no easy way, shortcuts to learning the business. You got to do the deals. You got to get the reps. You have to do get the experience. Mentorship is huge. Having a strong memory in terms of, who you meet, properties, the market conditions, deals, all of that. And then ultimately breaking through ceilings of complexity. That's what's going to, make sure you're staying, in the industry and not just, here for a couple of years and then out. So
I'll give you
any
one
last
more. I'll
words?
give you one more of the 6 just to add as we end this. Can't waste time.
Yeah.
Can't waste time. If you think you're gonna go in the office and shoot the shit, like a lot of our young guys will go in there and they'll see these old brokers that have big clients and they're sitting around talking the shit. I mean, you can't. You have to go and put your head down every day. And that's a real hard thing for people who are social. Because as a
Yep.
broker, we have to be out in the marketplace. So time savings, time commitment, being able to be really efficient with your time is a failure or success marker in our business.
Yep, absolutely. And it only gets harder, right? As you get, more and more added to your life and more added to your career, you just got to get more and more efficient. So
Exactly.
awesome. Well, thank you so much and appreciate the time.
Thank you.